Hello, BookTube. Recently, Robert G., reader of books, made back-to-back fascinating videos that I thought about the first one, who I'm going to talk about right now, for a long time. Many dog walks that should have been devoted to smelling poop were instead devoted to thinking over this particular subject. And then the next video that he made was the same way. So I want to make response videos, a Robert G. double header, a double creature feature. And the first video that I want to respond to, I'll leave it linked down below, is the first one of the ones that caught my attention. He is reading Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. A fascinating book, work of nonfiction from a couple of years ago, where she talks about the experience of being mistaken online for Naomi Wolf. It's not anymore a very healthy thing to have happen to you. And that leads her in her book to what I think is a fairly sloppily put together, but still pretty interesting, meditation on selfhood in the age of the internet. Much written about subject that is fascinating. And that subject fascinated me even before it became an active part of my life. I never actually thought that it would become an active part of my life, but I am a YouTuber. And so is Bob. And that entails dealing with the concept of an online doppelganger. Not necessarily someone for whom you're being mistaken. Although, boy oh boy, can I talk about that. Oh my, can I talk about that. Because for years and years, and it is still going on, I was mistaken, and am still being mistaken, for a Victorian-era Irish jockey with my name, who was a superstar, had chocolates named after him. It was on tins of biscuits and whatnot, and the equivalent of trading cards. And I noticed that happening at first when I first started making videos on YouTube, and I thought, oh, well, this will fix itself. I mean, it is completely obvious. This isn't a question of Naomi Klein and Naomi Wolf. It's completely obvious which of us is which. But no, no, more than one internet database of one kind or another. Noticing me, this was when I was not only making BookTube videos, but returning to the reviewing world, not only noticed me, but assumed I was that Victorian flatbed jockey. To the point where I would look at myself on some database, and they would have either they would have an entry about that 19th century Steve Donahue with my picture to identify it, or they would have a picture an entry about me with his picture. And it didn't take long of me experiencing that to realize what the reason was, because these things were being slapped together by 20-somethings who think, well, the Steve Donahue that I'm watching talk about books on YouTube seems really old. How do I know he's not that guy? The concept of a century seems to be lost on young people now, and maybe all the time. So I am familiar with that, to have people just assume you're someone else. But Bob's conversation went on, actually, at Klein's book, kind of, sort of, off-balance lurches to the same subject, the same broadening of that subject. Bob goes straight to it, which is not being mistaken for someone else, which is the gimmick that starts off the book Doppelganger, but rather crafting someone else, crafting a curated version of yourself for online presentation. I thought that was fascinating. The more I thought about that, the more fascinating I found it. Mainly because of how many different degrees there are of that activity. Those of you who make BookTube videos will know perfectly well what he's talking about. You are suddenly on camera. Well, who is it that's on camera? Bob mentions that there are parts of his personality that are seldom or never mentioned on his channel, which is all about books. And yet he stresses, he's not lying to you, he's not misrepresenting anything. And that immediately made me think of the earliest days of what we now call BookTube, where most of the bigger channels, it would be doing them an extreme kindness to say that they were presenting carefully curated versions of themselves. They were just lying. They were presenting, it wasn't a doppelganger, it was a false persona, a completely fake persona. They would pop onto screen and pinwheel their arms and talk in screaming, screeching voices like they were having a stroke, like they were having some sort of mental episode. And they absolutely did not act that way when the camera was off. Absolutely they did not. And it wasn't just, I mean, those were the most exaggerated examples, but there are plenty of smaller examples that were still not honest in any way. And if those proto-booktubers who did that became successful, actually I should say proto-YouTubers of any kind, it was very popular to do in the early 2010s. If they become successful, then suddenly they feel trapped by their persona. So that you would get a very prominent booktuber making a, hey guys, wow, how wacky video about a book he hasn't read. Sometimes they would have to just admit that, but usually they didn't. Usually they implied that they had read it. But there's a wacky, high-energy, Zoom, all sorts of antic energy video. And when he stopped making the video, he would deflate, and it would be, oh, I'm glad that crap's over for another day. Like anyone would want to do that to themselves, and yet plenty of people did. And that, I don't know. I don't think of that as a doppelganger. I think a doppelganger is much closer to being identical than that. That is just a lie. That's just a lying persona. And I really wish that I could say that approach to BookTube died out at the end of the 2010s and the beginning of the 2020s when BookTube was suddenly not this small or fringe thing anymore. I wish I could say that it had died out. I certainly wish I could say that it doesn't exist on BookTube, but it does, very much so, where people will present to the camera a warm, bubbly, cuddly exterior, nice exterior, etc., etc. And they absolutely are not that way when the camera is off. Which, in a way, not a way that I sympathize with, but a way feeds into a point that Bob was making later in his video. But the first point that he made, I think, is closer to the discussion that I want to foist on the rest of you. Which, especially if you make videos, which is what degree of curation do you do? And is that degree of curation governed by the fact that if it went any further than that, you would feel fake? You would feel like you were lying. I'm really, really curious to know that. I think a lot of us think of curation in terms of very venial sins for presentation reasons. Think about the booktubers that you watch, right? The number one criticism that I get, I leave my video on my email on every video, and some people feel free to email me with criticisms about my friends. I got one particular email on that subject. I still haven't decided what to do with it. I am so tempted to make a full-length video about it. I got one email about that a couple of weeks ago that was just that. It was a long, long email dissecting everything that the emailer hated about all the people. They had to have known the people in that video were my friends. In that email were my friends. They had to have known that because they missed nobody, and they didn't pick anybody that I don't like. But I'm not talking about that video now. I'm still trying to decide whether or not to make a response to that video. But when I get friendly emails from people about booktuber presentation styles, they are usually not talking about the kind of snipping and cutting of extraneous non-book details that Robert G. was talking about. They're usually talking about something else. And the two names that come up are Hannah's books, and Michael K. Vaughan. Those are the two names that come up usually when people email me about booktube presentation styles. Usually pointing out, Hannah has been here at Hyde Cottage many times, and people point out, when she's talking off the cuff, she sounds a lot less scripted and rehearsed than she does in her videos. And when talking about Michael K. Vaughan, they are talking about, he's doing some sort of a bit. He's doing a performance. But they say that as if they're discovering something that no one knows. When of course, in both cases, that change is intentional. Hannah has said many times on her channel that she gets really self-conscious when she's just alone in a room talking to a camera, and that leads her to lean a little more on preparation than when she's certainly in a room or on a Zoom conversation with me. There are no awkward conversations when I'm involved, but that there's nothing that the prepared Hannah will say on camera that is any different substantially from the so-called unprepared Hannah on camera. I can attest to the fact that they are both extremely deep waters. And same thing with Michael K. Vaughan. It's a way that you do your channel. It's not false at all. It's just a bit. And it's pretty damn good. As bits go, it's pretty damn good. Those two examples come up, but there are lots of others. I'm sure that if you think about it, you will think of others. And that makes me want to know what you think about this subject. Does your BookTube viewing get contoured specifically along the question of a doppelganger? Do you find that the BookTube videos you like most are the ones that seem to you like they're the closest to the person behind the camera? I'm curious about this for a whole bunch of reasons. I think that the question, for instance, is at the heart of a lot of what is wrong with not only YouTube but BookTube. The things that are wrong about it tend, I think, to revolve around questions of authenticity. But also, I can't help but think about it because I've lost track of how many people have come here to Hyde Cottage and said, "You're exactly the same as you are on camera." I've lost track of how many people have said that. And yet, I do curating, same as what Robert G. was talking about. I do curating. There are a couple of subjects that I tend not to talk about on camera. In my own defense, I would say anyone who knows me outside of YouTube would say that too is authentic. There are some subjects where when they happen, when they crop up, when they are prominent in my life, I simply disappear. So all of a sudden my friends are groping around. It's not just YouTube. It's my friends are groping around saying, okay, well, where are you? Or you're here, but something seems to be bothering you. And I have one old friend who, it's been years, but one old friend pointed out, here for Wine and Calzone, said something seems to be bothering you, and the list of things that genuinely bother you is so short that I feel I can come up with it if I ask a couple of questions. But mostly it's exactly the same. I haven't changed my presentation style or my jokes or my commentary in quite some time. But I don't know that it applies to me when it comes to watching booktubers. I think I have a high tolerance for doppelgangers, provided I don't think the person is simply lying. I have tried, and I cannot watch a bubbly, happy, funny, grinny channel when I know. I trust my instincts. I trust my ability to read people. When I know that person is not like that when the camera is off, then I can't stand to watch it when the camera is on. But that's not the same thing as someone choosing which aspects of their personality they will show you and not show you. So I wonder what you think of that, of this first part, of to what extent your awareness of a person's doppelganger or curating, to what extent that affects how you watch, or if you watch at all. Do you find when you look at not necessarily your BookTube subscription list, but the list of channels where you don't miss a video? So not when you're subscribed and you're scrolling through and you're thinking, maybe I'll get to that. But the list of people where you don't miss a video. Is authenticity a common element of that small list within a list? I'm really curious to know that. I think that it probably is. I think in the middle of the 2020s, authenticity, hunger for authenticity is starting to become a real thing, a real deciding point. Maybe, ironically, with the rise of AI. Either way, I would love to know. But that brings us to the second point that Bob made in his video, which is not necessarily the curation of an alternate version of yourself, but the drain that takes. Is that a strain on you? Now here, the discussion loses me pretty much completely. I can talk about curating a self for the camera. I can definitely talk about that. I don't do much of it. I really don't. I really don't do much of it. You pretty much know me when you're watching these videos. You pretty much know me. And like I said, if I'm going to pull away because something has disappointed me or angered me or saddened me, I'm going to do that all around, not just on camera, but off camera. It's exactly the same. An old friend of mine used to go on and on about this, used to say, you know, when you're always there for me, but when you need me, you're hiding behind the couch, or you've gone behind the garage, metaphorically speaking. You pull away when you need that sort of reassurance. If that's true, it's certainly as true in personal life as it is online. So I can understand the subject just a bit, but the second part about being drained by your avatar, by your curated self, that I don't get at all. And I wonder, those of you who make videos, do you feel any of this stuff that Robert G was talking about, and especially the second part? Does being on camera drain you, specifically because it's not exactly you? It's not just you turning on a camera and just talking. I would love to hear all about that. This is a crucial subject. It's at the heart of what we do here. I mean, books are at the heart of what we do here, but in order to make videos about books, we have to present ourselves on camera. So you fellow booktubers of mine, I want to know all about this. How do you do that? What degree of artificiality is involved? Oh, it's a fascinating video. I thought about whether or not I should make a response video, but I can't help it. I definitely want to know all this. So feel free, both as a booktuber, for the second part, especially whether or not that self drains you, but also as a viewer. How high a premium do you put on authenticity? And how accurate do you think you are at assessing it? I'd love to hear all that. Those are active questions in my mind, active considerations in my mind when I'm looking at a booktube channel. Like, for instance, the Hall of Horrors here would be the booktube newbie tag. If you go to the search bar of YouTube and you type in booktube newbie tag, you will get, and then sort by upload date, you'll get the last week of people doing the booktube newbie tag. And I say that the hunger for genuine authenticity is growing in the 2020s, but you wouldn't always be able to tell it from booktube newbie tags. I realize it's just the very first time, so you can't judge it, but quite a bit of art, to my mind, quite a bit of artificiality involved there. I wonder if you see the same thing, and I wonder how off-putting you find it. Or are you just, I mean, you won't find it off-putting at all if you're expecting booktube to be TV. TV is all that. So you won't find it off-putting at all if that's what you're thinking. But if you're not, if you're coming here for something else, maybe it governs what you watch. I would love to hear about it. So anyway, I'll leave a link to Bob's video down below. This is part 1 of my Robert G. Reader of Books Creature double feature. So I'll wrap this up for now. I'll see you in the next one.